I can't talk about trading him anymore. So that made it harder on me because there's no more Kyle Rudolph trade talk. Where it made it easier was we know exactly what we're talking about for today's show.
That's true. I think the next 6 weeks, though, I will all be happy that we're not speculating. Is he going to the Patriots? Is he going to, I don't know, what was the other team? Pittsburgh. They need a tight end. The Raiders need a tight end. What team needs a tight end? Maybe Kyle Rudolph could be the guy. But, I mean, the timing is good. We expected it to happen. Not lingering into training camp is what Kyle said. So it gets done going into minicamp. Makes all the sense in the world. Get the team together. It's the final install, these final 3 days. Then you break. He comes back. He's on, it is a reduced price. They're able to move his cap hit down. I believe NFL Network said about $4 million. So the Vikings get what they want. They get to retain the player, have some short-term stability here in terms of what they can do with the cap and rolling that $4 million into, which, I mean, it's going to dissipate. It'll probably end up being about $2 million by the time it's done after they sign the practice squad. But they have some cap flexibility. They can roll into 2020. And then Kyle gets to stay here, and he doesn't feel like he's shortchanged himself by that much. I mean, today, as he heard the sound at the beginning of the show, he said, he did say earlier that, he felt like he left some money on the table, but being here was more important. But in the end, $9 million guaranteed and upfront for him is not a bad paycheck considering where he is in his career and probably what he could get elsewhere.
$9 million guaranteed is less than I thought it was going to be for this contract. When the details came out last night, 4 years, $36 million, my estimate would have been somewhere in the range of half. His last contract was
18.5 million guaranteed.
That right. So that was my guess, is that he would get about the same. And for him to still be one of the higher paid by average annual salary, but also not hold this team back with the guaranteed money, it essentially turns into a 2-year deal this year and next year in 2020. And then if they want to move on after that, it's very likely that they'll be able to do so with a pretty low amount of dead cap money if they have to. And this is where the Minnesota Vikings are just good with their salary cap, is that they find ways to figure out exactly when players' primes are or their best years are going to be and not go any farther than that with their contracts, and also make sure the guys get their cash. And I think that in order to do that, you have to have an ownership. So everybody's always going to thank their owner when they get a contract. But I think when the Vikings say it, it's really true that the ownership is willing to pay the dollars that the players are going to need to make this work. Because that's kind of where it comes from, the trickle down of, if you want to have a really good cap situation, you got to have the people up top who are actually going to fork up the money for the signing bonus.
Absolutely. And I think that that's why the Saints, yes, they are in a really weird predicament with their cap space and what's going to happen when they finally get the bill, for lack of a better term, in a few years from now. But they're kind of doing something a little bit similar. I think theirs is a little bit more risky, but their ownership has given them that commitment to be able to extend guys, try to keep that core nucleus together, which, look at the offseason. It was Everson Griffin, then it was Anthony Barr, and now it's Kyle Rudolph. 3 core players on this team, both offense and defense, that they feel, we cannot win a championship without you. We need you here. The commitment is keeping you here so we can further our commitment to bringing our first Lombardi trophy to this franchise.
So Sam Monson is going to join us at 2:40 from Pro Football Focus, and he was talking about these moves on Twitter. I won't ruin what he's going to say, but there are 2 sides to this. There is the one side of bringing it all back, as they have done with all these players. They want the same core of the team that they had basically in 2017 here for 2019, because they believe that this core can win. But the argument on the other side is, if you don't think that these players are the same as they were. Now, maybe Anthony Barr is, but everybody else is quite a bit older, and some are on their way out of their prime. So even though Kyle Rudolph says he feels better at 29 than he did 21, which is probably true because he had injuries in college, but you're still talking about a guy who is in his late 20s, going into his 30s.
He's going to be on the wrong side of 30 very soon. By the time if he plays out the entirety of this contract, which goes to the 2023 season, he'll be 34. So at that point, you're probably, I know he was mentioning Tony Gonzalez today and, playing 17 years. I mean, that's the anomaly for that position. Like, that doesn't happen with tight ends all the time. It's a great goal to have. Is it achievable? I don't know. I mean, he's had a 9-year career so far. It's been very good, very consistent. Has it been great? I don't think I'd put it in that caliber. But where he's at right now, he's been very, very good and a key part of this franchise. But for the Vikings and the commitment that they're making, it's not a long-term commitment, which is why I think they're in a safe spot. They get what they want, and they still get to keep the player. It's not, when you look at these 4-year deals, and I've gotten a lot of questions on Twitter, it's like, oh, it's backloaded, it's this, that, and the other thing. It's the first, there's only injury guarantee for next year, and then there's the guarantee, which is his base salary, and then they bumped him up by like 1.6 million again this year, so his cap hit's able to go down. These 2 years are pretty much it. I mean, I think that if we're talking about Kyle Rudolph in 2021, we're talking about probably a new deal.
I think it tells you about the timeline of the organization, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. That over these next 2 years.
Win now.
When you look at the players that they have, it's amazing how it gets late early in football when you have a really good team, about how quickly things start to deteriorate and how difficult it is to keep everybody together. When you go up and down the roster, some of the higher paid players that they have, and how much longer will they be great? I mean, you can ask this question about Xavier Rhodes, who had a dip last year. Riley Reif isn't even great, but how much longer is he even going to be good? I think this is our last year of Riley Reif. Harrison Smith, how much longer will he be a perennial Pro Bowler and top 3 at his position? Linval Joseph, this might be his last year. Trey Waynes might hit free agency. Everson Griffin, I'm almost guaranteeing this is his last year. So this is kind of the last kick at the can for this group, is this year and next year with Kirk Cousins as the quarterback. And I'm not saying they'll have to tear it all down. That was the thing that Kyle Rudolph kind of pushed back against a little bit when I think you asked him about win now, that he pushed back against a little bit.
They want to keep winning for the foreseeable future.
Yes. And that's true.
They want to win for a long time was the quote.
I mean, everybody does.
He did say that it's like I was asking him just about the moves this offseason. All of them reflect the all-in 2019 mentality. And He said it certainly embodies the win now mentality, but to me, it just embodies how much they care about winning, period, which is true. I had a conversation with Mark Wilf about back at the owners meetings in March, and we talked just about the elusive Lombardi Trophy. And I said, do you think you would have won one by now? And is that something that you think about often? He's like, I think about it every day. Like, and that's something too. Patience gets tested after a while. Jobs become further on the hot seat when patience is tested. So they're doing their part with the financial support to be able to give players these front-loaded deals in terms of the guarantees and everything else, and then they backload everything else. They're able to do that because they are just as anxious about winning this championship and doing something since they got here in 2006. It's time. It's time for them too. And I think that the moves that this team has made all reflects an ownership group that's saying, hey, we're all in. We realize the Super Bowl window is small. Maybe the front office doesn't always realize that, but they do, and they want the moves to reflect that.
6'5"